I've read that you guys actually hated each other for a while.
Well, we were very competitive. Yeah, I think hate's a good word.
Is he a friend and a rival, or just a rival?
No. In the 80s, he was just a rival.
Two action icons, one bitter rivalry. For years, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger ruled Hollywood. Stallone, the gritty underdog; Schwarzenegger, the unstoppable machine. But behind the scenes, it was all-out war. What looked like healthy competition hid a personal feud filled with studio sabotage, power plays, and one legendary prank that pushed Stallone over the edge. In this deep dive, we uncover the real reason Stallone hated Schwarzenegger, how their feud nearly wrecked careers, and the unexpected twist that brought it all to an end. Buckle up. This is the action story you never saw coming. Origins of the rivalry. Long before they became titans of testosterone-fueled cinema, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger were two very different men chasing the same impossible dream. One came from the rough streets of Hell's Kitchen with a script in his gym bag and a face producers told him would never work. The other crossed the Atlantic from Austria, barely speaking English but with a body sculpted like a Greek statue and the unshakable belief that America was his for the taking. In the 1970s, Stallone made himself a household name with Rocky, a script he wrote, starred in, and refused to sell unless he could be the lead. It was a massive gamble that paid off in gold. The film didn't just win Best Picture. It turned Stallone into the face of the American underdog. Then came First Blood and Rambo, First Blood Part 2, which exploded Stallone's career even further, transforming him into a war hero on screen and a cultural symbol off of it, while Schwarzenegger was carving out a different legacy altogether. After conquering Mr. Olympia 7 times and becoming the most renowned bodybuilder on the planet, Arnold had dreams that went beyond just being posed by cameras. He actually wanted to own them. It would be Conan the Barbarian, 1982, that made the difference, but it was really the Terminator in 1984 that would declare him a sensation. With sparse dialogue and heavy presence, he completely redefined the image of an action star. "I'll be back," the iconic line from his character, wasn't simply a promise. It was a forewarning for every action star in Hollywood. Everyone obviously began comparing. The real heavyweight toss-up was, thus, about to begin. Whose muscles were bigger? Who took home a fatter paycheck? Who had catchier lines, the best sleighs, the most dazzling explosions? The thing was consequential behind doors, though. Both read those headlines. Both felt the weight of those comparisons, and neither enjoyed being the second. Stallone has always guarded his lane as a private highway of sorts. He is an actor, yes, but he is also a writer, a director, and a creator. He bled, literally bled, for his films. While shooting Rocky IV, for instance, he was put in a hospital with a blow to his chest, the blow dealt to him by none other than Dolph Lundgren. To Stallone, his craft was no less than an all-out war. And so, when Schwarzenegger's movies began ruling the box office with less of a story and more of a spectacle, Stallone saw red. It was not only money, though. Such was the difference in rise that it put Schwarzenegger into the category of a new breed of action stars, as if the days of gritty, flawed heroes like Rocky were over, and the genetically impossible superhumans took his place. Studios would follow suit with more muscles, more fantasy, and less reality. From where Stallone stood as he watched the formula begin to change, and the first man breaking new ground was Arnold. Schwarzenegger had his own reasons for watching Stallone. He knew Stallone had history, fans, and Oscar credibility. Mocked for his accent and wooden delivery, Arnold could not help the fact that Stallone, depending on the movie and the nature of the role, managed to earn grittier and less mainstream respect. Arnold had bigger aspirations than just being a blockbuster machine. He wanted respect. Stallone had it, and Arnold wanted it too. So they began circling each other, not so much in direct confrontation as via their films. One would release a new hit, while the other rushed into production on something in retaliation, something bigger, bloodier, and louder. Rambo 3 struck back against Predator. Total Recall returned fire on Tango and Cash. Even the scripts began to include some humorous digs at each other. By the mid-80s, the rivalry was no longer subtle. It was war, loud, glitzy, and highly public. But beneath all this flexing and bombast was something more vulnerable. Two men who had fought their way to the top, both terrified of being pushed off the perch by the other. But it wasn't just numbers that drove a wedge. It was something far more personal. The fight for the throne. By the late 1980s, the action genre wasn't just booming, it was mutating. Bigger muscles, bigger weapons, bigger egos. And right in the middle of it stood Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, locked in a battle that no one in Hollywood dared to ignore. What had started as a quiet rivalry was now a public Cold War, and both men were pulling every trick they had to dominate the action throne. Behind the scenes, studio executives loved the rivalry. It kept both actors hungry, and competitive actors meant better performances and bigger box office returns. But for Stallone and Schwarzenegger, this wasn't a game. It was personal, very personal. He was always a perceptive one, seeing himself not as just a handsome face, not that a big body behind those faces. He wrote Rocky. He created Rambo. He had even directed his films. He made Arnold into a great actor with his heat, beating all the charts off the chart of Commando and Predator. But he never thought of this as being a threat to his creativity. To him, Arnold was an opportunist, tight-accented, and a little limited. But all that was on the verge of breaking. Terminator II, Judgment Day would change all that. In 1991, James Cameron's futuristic epic hit the big screen. It really blew the box office away. The effects were out of this world. The story was tight, and most slays it best of all. Schwarzenegger was more than just a lifeless cyborg slayer. He had become almost charming fatherly. Audiences just ate it up. The film grossed more than $500 million worldwide and solidified Arnold as not just a muscle man, but a heartthrob global star. The next year, Stallone's reply came in "Stop" or "My mom will shoot," which he later dubbed one of the worst decisions of his life. Most people do not know, however, that Schwarzenegger was directly responsible for that embarrassing occurrence without coming anywhere near the studio lot. Stallone himself has admitted that Arnold got wind of the script and intentionally acted interested in starring in the film. He baited Stallone into taking the role, knowing he couldn't resist a good competition. Stallone bit hook, line, and grenade. The film bombed. Critics were vicious. And it became a punchline for the first time in his career. "He tricked me, and I fell for it," he later admitted. That was not the only stab jab. In Last Action Hero, 1993, Arnold's character walks past a video store standee for Terminator II only. It has Stallone's face slapped on the cover instead of his own. Everyone, however, got the joke. And Arnold loved twisting the knife. Meanwhile, the scripts began to reflect the rivalry ever more. Stallone's Demolition Man was meant to joke about Arnold's political ambitions with the phrase about the Schwarzenegger Presidential Library. The mockery had its play on the surface, but was sharp underneath. In interview, Stallone would smirk in calling Arnold a robot, one-note actor. On the other side, Arnold would just grin and proclaim Stallone a meathead with a typewriter. Privately, though, insiders understood it was total war. The studios split in two. The directors who collaborated with one would never try to approach the other. Scripts were pitched to both actors simultaneously, with each demanding infringing rewrites with respect to their characters. The scripts went through changes so that every man emphatically had the better lines, the bigger slays, and the more heroic ending. More than that, the fans get divided into the fold. It was either Team Sly or Team Arnold, no middle ground. The magazine covers fought out in publicity with the same kind of gravitas as heavyweight boxers. For kids on playgrounds, the real debate was who would win in an actual fight, Rambo or the Terminator. Now, this was not just about stardom. This myth-making was happening in real time. However, one thing became clearer. They could not stand losing to one another. Stallone once confessed that he could not bear seeing Schwarzenegger succeed, especially when he thought his scripts had more depth. It was years later that Arnold admitted, in fact, that he had faked the rivalry for himself to stay at the top. And it worked. But then came a moment that wasn't just professional. It was a setup meant to humiliate. Sabotage Stallone never forgot. In the unrelenting war between Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, few moments hit harder or cut deeper than the one involving a bucket, a diaper, and the front page of every tabloid in America. It was crude. It was humiliating. And worst of all, it was allegedly orchestrated by Arnold himself. The year was 1992, and Stallone was desperately trying to recover from a string of box office missteps. His recent comedy venture, Oscar, had flopped, and the industry buzz was brutal. Is Stallone losing his edge? Meanwhile, Arnold was basking in the success of Terminator II and beginning to flex his muscle off-screen as well, dipping into politics and high-end real estate. The power balance between the two was shifting, and Stallone knew it. Then came Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot. The movie wasn't just bad. It was career-wounding. And the most infuriating part? Stallone had taken the project because he believed Arnold was circling it. As Stallone later confessed, "I heard he wanted it, so I rushed in. Turns out he wanted me to take it all along." But the last move was not dealt on the celluloid, but in paper. A tabloid published a photo of Stallone on set, holding a prop baby in one arm and a dirty diaper in the other. The headline was merciless: Rambo potty trained. It wasn't only ridicule, it was blackened image assassination. For a man whose brand could be built on raw grit and testosterone, this was a different kind of defeat. And the whispers behind the photo came from that direction. Schwarzenegger's camp. There was never any proof, but everyone inside would swear that it was Arnold who leaked the embarrassing photograph to the tabloids. After all, by that time he knew connections everywhere in Hollywood, from editors to gossip columnists to agents eager for his favor. It only added fuel to the rumor mill when a former publicist, speaking on an anonymous basis, claimed that Arnold had got a file of how to keep Stallone below him in the public eye. He was always smiling, said the source, but he played the game like a chess master. Every move calculated, every headline earned. Stallone did not take this casually. Insiders said the diaper picture was a watershed moment. The actor stopped reading trade publications altogether. He could no longer be bothered to turn up for movie premieres. He avoided interviews for months. His self-assurance, formerly of steel, was chipped. Friends said he got increasingly obsessed with controlling his own image and wanted to approve the photos, posters, and even his wardrobe. One producer recalled that on Cliffhanger alone, he personally rejected 47 promotional shots before approving one. Behind closed doors, the fury was festering. Stallone's team wanted retaliation, not through scandal, but rather storytelling. He ramped up the assault on his action persona, pressed harder on scripts such as Demolition Man and The Specialist, and began inserting veiled insults to Arnold throughout the dialogue. That line about the Schwarzenegger Presidential Library? Not just a joke. That was a straight-up middle finger, cloaked in satire. But Arnold played it cool, at least he pretended to. In every interview, he showered praises upon Stallone while grinning what was a bit too widely. He knew the diaper trick had worked. He did not even need to say it. The damage was done. And Stallone? He never publicly accused Arnold, never demanded retraction. Now, however, in a 2013 interview, almost 20 years later, he finally said this: "There are things that went down between us that crossed the line. He played dirty, but I learned from it, and I never forgot." The diaper story became much more than just a tabloid headline. It became the figurehead of the lowest point in their rivalry, where psychological warfare took precedence over physical showdowns and the stakes weren't flexing, but humiliation. Yet just at that moment of greatest bitterness in their feud, a strange twist began to be felt. One neither of them expected, and not in Hollywood, but in Sacramento. That prank might have been funny to Arnold, but to Stallone, it was the final straw. Trash talk and public jabs. By the early 2000s, the muscle-bound rivalry that once ruled the silver screen was fading, or so it seemed. Audiences had moved on. Action stars were younger, leaner, and less reliant on brute force. Yet just when the world thought the Schwarzenegger-Stallone feud had burned out, something happened that reignited the spotlight in a completely unexpected way. Arnold ran for governor of California and won. It was 2003 when Arnold Schwarzenegger made a move that blindsided Hollywood. In the midst of a chaotic gubernatorial recall election, the Terminator announced he would be stepping into politics. Most thought it was a publicity stunt. After all, how could a bodybuilder-turned-action hero with a thick Austrian accent take over the world's fifth-largest economy? And there it was, the election, sudden, historic, and infuriating, to Sylvester Stallone. Charisma, name recognition, and a lightning-quick campaign message enabled Arnold Schwarzenegger to defeat veteran politicians and stride directly into the California governor's mansion. By then, Schwarzenegger ranked high with presidents of his choice and was spending his time drafting state budgets, while Stallone was rotting away in forgettable action flops. Avenging Angelo, Detox, Shade, movies that barely made a scratch on the box office. Another one for Arnold Day. This one in a field of play that shall never embarrass him. Not punches, not one-liners, but politics. Now that stung real good. Because Arnold was now beating him not only at the Hollywood game, but also the very public game. Talk among insiders has it that Stallone considered the move an eye-opener. He didn't see it coming, a close friend of Stallone's explained. Arnold just leapfrogged into history while Sly was still stuck playing the same characters. One studio executive also remarked, Schwarzenegger went from action star to actual star, while Stallone stayed a script rewrite away from straight to DVD. Among those who have sour but somehow known relations, Stallone genuinely acknowledged Arnold's gutsy career turnaround, although the former never said a word about it. He may hate the guy deep inside, but the essence of ambition relates deep into his skin. Always playing chess, while everybody else picked a few squares of checkers and eventually landed at the ultimate endgame with becoming governor as the ultimate move. Schwarzenegger's entry into politics doesn't make things easy for them. It also completely changes the host narrative in which their dual existence appeared whenever either was used in action. No more are they actors who just compete with each other in terms of box office numbers, but they are now seen as icons with different legacies. One steps into global conversations on policy and climate change. The other is trying to resuscitate a deceased Rocky and Rambo. Arnold would even go as far as using their common ground to make light of the way they were at above just standing where they are. At all the charity events and press conferences, jokes about Stallone's movies were always being mentioned. He once said, while discussing California's prison overcrowding, "Maybe we should send them to watch Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot. That'll scare them straight." And everyone in the arena laughed, except Stallone himself. There was an undeniable shift in their dynamic. Perhaps it was age, maybe it was the recognition that their war had raged through decades. But there was something that started softening them, although they never said so loudly. In very closed circles, both men started attending many of the same fundraising events. Gradually, their names showed up on the same charity boards. There were even whispers of brief but cordial comments exchanged between them at awards ceremonies. But before that happened, a shocking betrayal that nearly derailed everything and brought their rivalry roaring back to life. The Cold War behind the camera. If there was a moment that truly reignited the decades-old tension between Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, it came in the form of a strategic backstab disguised as a joke. One that cost Stallone his pride, his box office reputation, and, worst of all, gave Schwarzenegger the last laugh. The year was 1992. Stallone was at a low point in his career, trying to stay relevant in an industry that was quickly evolving beyond brawn. Action comedies were taking over, and studios wanted something lighter. That's when the script for Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, landed on his desk. Well, it was bad. Stallone knew it. His agent certainly knew it. The critics were really, or pretty sure, going to know it. But the thing was, it was very high stakes because he couldn't go on turning down projects. Then the phone call that changed everything came. He heard that Arnold Schwarzenegger was very interested in it. Geese. What had seemed a horrible script now suddenly seemed not so bad at all. If Arnold wanted it, then perhaps it really had something. Perhaps it was going to be a surprise hit. Perhaps this is one of those weird career moves that people will scratch their heads over until it happens, just like Arnold's managed with Twins and Kindergarten Cop. Maybe Stallone could pull that off himself. Stallone made a call to the producers, who were happy to agree. They signed the contract, and that was it. He was in. What he didn't know was that Schwarzenegger really hadn't wanted the part anyway. In fact, reading the script was a particular moment for Arnold in that he found it so horrible that he concocted a plan to sabotage Stallone. In interviews later, Schwarzenegger would open up about this and smile while describing how, "I told my agent to leak it, that I was interested. I knew if Sly thought I wanted it, he'd take it. And it worked." Stallone went on to make Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, which turned out to be a bomb. The film was lambasted by critics. Audiences responded with ridicule. The film would later become a way for Hollywood to illustrate bad decisions made under duress. The film barely grossed $70 million worldwide and gave Stallone a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actor. But the real downside wasn't the box office failure, it was an embarrassment. Stallone had walked right into a trap set by that very man whom he had tried so hard to avoid at the box office for the last 2 years. Rivalry had cast its shadow over their judgment, and Arnold had played him like a chess piece. Stallone took it very badly. People close to him claimed that it was the final straw. He no longer mentioned Arnold in interviews. He didn't turn up for any events where Schwarzenegger would be present. The Cold War was back, and this time, it was personal. Many years later, after Arnold's public chuckle over the prank, Stallone responded during a panel, visibly agitated. "That movie? That was a mistake. I blame my competitiveness, and I learned a hard lesson about trusting people who smile too much." It would have bent his psyche. Moreover, it did not only dimple his ego. A gap, so-called bridge, between those two was widened further. Neither producers nor mutual friends were left behind at the back door. But between a possible collaborative effort, face-off film, maybe a buddy cop flick much did not stick. Trust was non-existent. They finally joined forces, but the tension didn't vanish. It simmered just beneath the surface. The Expendables Era. It was a moment fans had dreamed of for decades. Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger finally sharing the screen, not as rivals, but as allies. Or so it seemed. The release of The Expendables in 2010 looked like the perfect cinematic reunion, a celebration of 1980s and 90s action stars, drenched in explosions, one-liners, and nostalgia. But behind the biceps and bullets, there was a storm brewing. Because even though the cameras were rolling, the old resentment between Stallone and Schwarzenegger had never really disappeared. It had just gone quiet. Arnold's appearance in the first Expendables film was little more than a cameo, a wink to the fans, a symbolic handshake, but it was enough to spark endless speculation. Were these two former enemies finally on good terms? Had the past been buried? Not quite. Insiders from the production later admitted that the scene appears playful at the surface, but is carefully negotiated behind the scenes. Schwarzenegger, who still holds office as the governor of California, could only give a short shoot. Hence, he agreed to appear on screen with Stallone on the condition that he would not share the screen with him. Others say it's more logistical. Some say it's personal. Stallone, who wrote, directed, and starred in the eventual film, reportedly accepted the request without protest, but not without some frustration. He had built The Expendables more like a passion project to reclaim some relevance and remind the world of what real action looked like. Having Arnold show up and restrict his input stung more than he let on. But that was only the beginning. By the time The Expendables 2 began production in 2011, Schwarzenegger was through with politics and ready to get back into Hollywood full-time. This time, he'd get real parts, real lines, real action. The dream has come true. Stallone and Schwarzenegger on screen together, side by side. But dreams are messy when pride is involved. Reports from set described a dynamic that was, in a word, tense. Another description for it was unfriendly. The two were professional but not as well acquainted. They did not eat together. There were no jocular moments between takes, not even side-by-side rehearsal of scenes unless absolutely necessary. And they said a lot of things through the assistants and crew members. One camera operator felt you could feel it in the room. Every time one of them walked in, the energy changed. There was no shouting, no conflict, just very obvious wall. Stallone has always been a perfectionist. He was intent on trying to make the film work, but according to those who knew him well, it was somewhat pressing to direct scenes with Schwarzenegger. He would want to shine brighter than Arnold. Even if Arnold delivered it, he would land the knockout. Yet, for Schwarzenegger, there was a separate plan in progress. He seemed to be stepping back into movie-making after nearly 10 years, and his latest role had to work for him, from demonstrating that he is still larger than life to denying that he can ever be outdone by Stallone, which, even if it is Stallone's film and starring him, has got to be avoided. But there was still one final question. Would these two titans ever truly make peace? Or was their final chapter already written in silence? From enemies to almost friends, fans waited and waited. For years, the hope lingered that Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, titans of action cinema, would finally team up in a full-scale cinematic epic. A two-hander, a showdown, a legacy-defining project that would unite Rambo and the Terminator in one unforgettable clash. But that moment never came. And now, looking back, it's clear. It wasn't just missed, it was never truly possible. Despite the shared screen time in the Expendables franchise, Stallone and Schwarzenegger never gave fans what they really wanted. A film built entirely around them. Not a cameo, not an ensemble piece, a face-off. So why didn't it happen? The truth is far more revealing than any studio scheduling excuse. By the time the 90s rolled in, both men were near the pinnacle of their fame and were nearing the limit of their tolerance for each other. Interviews of the times were diplomatic, bordering on friendly. They joked about being friendly competitors. Behind the scenes was a Cold War. They monitored each other's box office figures. When Schwarzenegger's Terminator II shattered all expectations, Stallone quickly arranged for Cliffhanger and Demolition Man. Schwarzenegger chose then to fire in Eraser when Stallone accepted his role in Judge Dredd. It was not just about who the contest was, also about who survives. An executive from a studio that had worked with both Stallone and Schwarzenegger during this period explains, "There were just too similar to share the screen together. Two gods couldn't inhabit the same Olympus." The scripts that pitched the two as rival cops, soldiers turned enemies, and even separated brothers. Still, time and again, as the deal was about to go through, the deal fell apart, usually over the issue of control. Who gets top billing? Who gets more screen time? Who looks bigger as a hero? Himself in the late 90s was one of the best stories. The script nearly went pre-production at a point, and the story was about two former special forces, a mercenary and a patriot, who had to come together to stop a rogue faction. Both actors even had negotiations for leading the project, but according to the leaked notes, neither would let the other win the final fight. Thus, the script has been shelved indefinitely. Stallone, however, seemed to be more open to working through long-ago rivalries for the sake of good cinema, while Schwarzenegger, ever the calculating Hollywood cat, preferred control over closure. He wanted to reshape his image on his own terms, first as a political leader, then as a mentor figure, not through some silly emotional release exercise on film. Stallone climbed into the nostalgia tree, an easy climb for him. He didn't run from his legacy, he lived it. Unfortunately, this difference in philosophy would never let them meet in the middle. Stallone wanted the film to be exciting to their joint past. Schwarzenegger wanted the film to prove that he still ruled over Stallone. Both refused to take the second fiddle. This was time. This was age. This was changing audiences. By the mid-2010s, the action genre had transformed. Superhero films now ruled the box office, and both the iconic stars retained all the zest in age. But the popular demand for a Stallone-Schwarzenegger headliner had gone to waste. They have missed the moment. The world moved forward. Who really won the war between Stallone and Schwarzenegger? Maybe the better question is, did anyone win at all? Let us know in the comments. Were you Team Stallone or Team Arnold? And if you want more behind-the-scenes drama from Hollywood's golden action age, like, subscribe, and watch the next video now.